Hello and welcome to RS Agarwal's IAS. In this video of the Daily News Express, let us discuss the important topics appearing in the Hindu newspaper dated 30th November 2020. Let us begin. This is the list of topics that we'll be discussing today. First, we'll talk about the importance of minimum support price in the backdrop of the farmers' protests. Then, we'll talk about the need of a vaccination policy for administering the COVID-19 vaccine. Then we'll discuss the editorial which speaks about what economy needs to be propelled since we've entered a technical recession. Then we'll learn some facets about the Paris Agreement. Then we'll learn about the suffer system that we'll discuss. And then we'll end the discussion with some facts related to geography. Let us move on to the first article of the day. In this article or the editorial of the Hindu newspaper, they are talking about the minimum support price and the continuous protests that are going on across Delhi and its borders. This caters to GS paper 2, and here we have to understand the minimum support price idea. What is the meaning of MSP or the minimum support price? Now, as the name goes, it is the minimum support price that is provided to the produce of the farmers that they are willing to sell. It is the minimum support price that is provided to the produce of the farmers which they are willing to sell, or in theory, if you say, it is the minimum price. It is the minimum price set by the government at which the farmers can be expected to sell their produce in the market, right? So if there is an MSP of, let's say, XYZ price for rice, and if the market price falls below this price, then the government will come in or the agencies will enter and procure the produce at this price. That will basically support them and will not make them vulnerable to the market conditions and for the demand and supply scenario that might affect the price of the produce. This variation in the market price can make them suffer losses, and minimum support price makes sure that they don't suffer losses. Now, of course, the government announces the MSP, but who particularly in the government? In the government, it is announced by the Cabinet Committee of Economic Affairs. It is announced by the Cabinet Committee of Economic Affairs at the beginning of the sowing season. At the beginning of the sowing season, based on the recommendations of what we call as CACP, or the Commission for Agricultural Costs and Price. On the recommendations of CACP, that is the Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices, the CCEA, that is the Cabinet Committee of Economic Affairs, announces the MSP for the produce in the country. Now, what apart from this you have to understand is that the CACP that gives its recommendations bases it on a few things. So, what is the factor or factors that the CACP takes into consideration while announcing the MSP? Now, there are 7 factors that I would like to put forth. First is the cost of production. What is the cost that farmers are putting in to produce this thing? Then the demand and supply scenario. Then they'll talk about the intercrop price parity, that is the difference between the price in each crop. Then we'll talk about the price trends in the national as well as the international market. Then they'll talk about terms of trade between agriculture and non-agriculture. That is, how much money are they willing to flush in and what is the agreements that they have, so on and so forth. Then they'll talk about a minimum 50% of the margin over the cost of production. So they should get some profit for their produce. They should not suffer losses. And lastly, they'll talk about the likely impacts or the likely implications of MSP on the consumers of the product. So these are the 7 things that they take into consideration. Let us revisit it. First is the cost of production. Second is the demand and supply scenario. Third is the intercrop price parity. Then they'll talk about the price trends in the national and the international market. Then they'll talk about the terms of trade between agriculture and non-agriculture. Then they'll talk about a minimum 50% margin over the cost of production. And then they'll talk about the likely implications or impact on the consumers of that product. Based on all this, the CACP provides the MSP or the recommendations and is finally announced by Cabinet Committee of Economic Affairs for the farmers. Now, it is pretty important for the farmers because first it protects them from the market volatility, the price volatility in the market. Then it will make sure they are not suffering losses, And then third, sometimes they'll get a bumper because of the MSP that has helped them. And most importantly, it is a surety for the farmers that they will surely get some benefit of the produce. They will not be stuck in a gamble of sorts. Now, what is happening in the central scenario is that the farmers are believing that with the incoming of the farm bills, there are three farm bills that have been bought out. The MSP regime will end. The MSP regime will come to an end, and farmers will not have the MSP regime for their produce. And there are new things that are coming into picture, like the contract based farming and the corporate entities and removal of mandis and interstate sale of the produce. Because of all these things, the farmers are of the assumption that MSP will end. Government in these bills has never said that they will put an end to MSP, but it's more than just a rumor that MSP will end. Now, here what is needed is, according to the editorial, the government should give an assurance that MSP will not end, and government has to make sure that it will be in the benefit of the farmers, and they should adhere to the demands of the farmers, because MSP plays a very important role for some small and marginal farmers of the country, and hence the protests are being stalled, and the government demands are also not being listened to. So first they should come up with an ordinance or an assurance, or let's say a piece of legislation that will say MSP will not go. Only then they can see that there will be the settling of this farmer protest. Otherwise, it will be quite tough for the government to manage this. So MSP becomes very important for us from UPSC point of view. We have to understand that there are several commodities that are covered under MSP, including commercial crops as well. With this, let us move on to the next article of the day. Here we are talking about the vaccination policy for COVID-19 vaccine. So this caters to GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3. Now we know that several contenders for vaccine are there. They are almost finished the phase 3 of the trials. You have Moderna, you have Sputnik from Russia, you have Pfizer, you have Bharat Biotech. You have so many fighters or the contenders in the race, and almost they are in the finishing line. So now next is the Indian scenario about who will procure, how will they procure, and how will they distribute it. So that becomes a vaccination policy. Now we have several policies in India for with regards to vaccination and several others that have been come into play and have done their work in a very straightforward and in a very good manner. But for COVID-19, since it's a pandemic and it has affected the global population and almost all segments of the country, we need to be aware of how we will be distributing this and what is the procedure we'll be undertaking. So there are a few basics that this article talks about. Let us learn about them. First is herd immunity. So you must have heard about the herd immunity. So what is herd immunity is, there is a segment of population. Let's say there is another segment. Now this segment of population is vulnerable to COVID-19, but this segment of population is not vulnerable to COVID-19 because at one point they've experienced COVID-19 or fought it, or their body has sufficient T cell response or immune response that will fight away COVID-19. Now, because of this immunity of this herd, it will be tough for COVID-19 virus to fight this immunity and then jump to this herd of the population. So this is called as the herd immunity that this segment of population possesses, and which stops the virus to multiply and go ahead for this vulnerable section of population. This is called as the herd immunity, and this effect is called as the herd effect. This effect is called as the herd effect. Now this is all the approaches that a vaccine policy should undertake and a vaccine should take into consideration if it is reaching the level of herd immunity, because it is said in many of the experts by many of the experts that 60% of the population, if immunized, it will play the role of herd immunity and will create herd effect, and the people will not be affected with COVID-19. We have to understand that. So when it comes to a vaccine, there are two things. First is the control of the disease, and the other is the elimination of the disease. Herd immunity can be a part of the control of the disease. Now we have several diseases in India that have been controlled, but they have not been stopped, and some diseases in India that have been stopped. For example, SARS has been eliminated, smallpox has been eliminated. As you know, even polio at one point has been eliminated, but we see one of the other cases coming, but WHO has surely declared that India has eliminated polio. Now this is the extreme stage, this is the next stage, but of course now it is not possible for COVID-19. The only thing that is possible for COVID-19 is to control the disease or retard the spread of the disease. Two things that we can do here: first is to have the herd immunity aspect, second is to take preventive measures like masks, sanitizers, social distancing, not going out for useless reasons. All this way we can retard the spread of the virus. Now if you talk about vaccination policy that country undertakes, you have to understand that the policy will be designed by the union government. We are talking about the vaccine policy. This will be designed by the union government and it will be undertaken or implemented by the state governments. Now the state governments feel that something is not enough, they can go across bounds and implement this particular policy in a better manner suited to their conditions, suited to their circumstances, etc. Now when it comes to the vaccine policy, various statements have been made from various dignitaries: health minister, health secretary, finance minister. This is not important from UPSC point of view, but yes, it is seen that they will come up with a vaccination policy. From this point of view, let us understand the universal immunization program that India undertakes for fighting several diseases. You have the Indradhanush program for 7 diseases. You have the Indradhanush intensified for more diseases. So these things are all there. Now, will COVID-19 policy, the COVID-19 vaccine policy, be a part of the universal immunization program, or will it be a different policy altogether? Is a quite vital question that this article asks for. So here are a few questions that this article puts forth for us to understand how will we fight the COVID-19 through vaccine, or simply how will our vaccination policy look like. Now first, do we have enough cold chain facility to store the vaccine? Because the Pfizer vaccine has said that it will be stored at minus 70 degree Celsius. Now do we have enough cold storage facility? We don't know. Second, will user be charged with fee? So if the government provides the policy, that the government provides the uh, vaccine, it will be free of cost. But when the private sector provides the vaccine, will it be free of cost? Again, important question to be answered. Now, is this vaccine allowed for all people, or it is allowed for only affected individuals, or only allowed for non-affected individuals? If affected people are allowed, how will you identify them? If non-affected people are allowed, how will you identify them? Then if you talk about the the population which is at risk, apart from healthcare workers and frontline workers, what about the children? How is this affecting the teacher-student scenario when it comes to school reopening? What about the vulnerable segments of the population? What about the older age population? So all these things are some important questions that this article talks about and asks the government, will this be considered in the vaccination policy? Next, we can talk about what we call as the disease control program. Will this be a part of the disease control program? Who will be the priority also? Where will it be conducted? Will it be done in the primary healthcare centers, or will be specific centers, or there will be an innovative approach, right? What if there is an adverse reaction? What if there is an adverse reaction after administration of this COVID-19 vaccine? How will that be treated? And then again, there is a vaccination site. What will be the vaccination site? How will it be managed, or how will it be controlled? Very important question. Who will provide the list, right? Who will plan it and who will execute it? Like, there should be a place where you are providing coupons, or the first come first serve. All these things should be very, very clear. It should not be subject to interpretation, because tomorrow anything can result in any possible manner. So these are the important questions that the government should answer when they formulate a policy for the administration of COVID-19 vaccine. It is quite important for all people to adhere to the norms set by this vaccination policy. Should not go overboard like it's free food coming to all of us. We should be very, very careful. And even there, when we are going to we are going to get administered with the vaccine, we have to maintain what we call as social distancing and go according to the procedures and the norms set by the government. So all these things are coming into picture. So if you are even brainstorming about a question that you can be asked about what a COVID-19 policy should look like, try answering all these questions from this article, and then you will have a good satisfied essay or like an answer for your mains exam. With this, let us move on to the next article of the day. Here we are talking about what economy needs. This caters to GS paper 3, simply Indian economy. Now we know that we have entered a technical recession. What is the meaning of a technical recession? It is where the economy contracts for two successive quarters. The economy contracts for two successive quarters, and we have seen it starting with 23%, it has gone down, and now again by 7.5% or so, it has gone down. Now even the NSO data, that is National Statistical Office, have also confirmed that it is the same figure. Not just the growth rate has gone down, but also the GDP estimate has gone down, and this is the first time in history that this thing has happened. Apart from this, what has gone down is private consumption. It has shrunk. Apparently, private consumption was one of the most important propellers of the Indian economy. It has shrunk, and it's spoken about that the gross fixed capital formation has shrunk. Exports have fallen, so have the imports. So basically, everything is under a very toughened scenario right now. But what we have seen is post lockdown, there have been few improvements. Of course, in the agriculture sector that happened to be functioning throughout, and there was the electricity that went up, manufacturing that went up. All these things have gone up. Even the GVA data, that is gross value added data, has gone up. Now why has this gone up? It has simply gone up because of demand in the economy. Now the most important thing here, see, if you see, India's economy needs a robust demand stimulus to avoid a protracted slump. So if the demand in the economy is pushed, is provided a stimulus to, then our economy will not slump and it will go ahead in the proper manner, in the proper regard. Now how do you push demand? You have to rationalize the schemes that you are going forward with, or the stimulus package that you are going forward with. It should be rationalized, and more than providing credit, you have to provide fiscal stimulus or monetary stimulus to the people of the country. You have to provide money in their hands so that they have the money to spend, and as a result demand increases. When demand increases, the supply will also increase, and when inflation and all those things comes into picture, the economy will come to a proper equilibrium and everything will fall into place. So basic thing is demand, which will obviously propel the private consumption, and of course everything will be set into place. This also puts into picture the need for globalization, demand, supply. All those things will also come into picture when you talk about these things. So this article or this editorial predominantly talks about how we need robust demand to propel what we are seeing as the historic recession. With this, let us move on to the next article of the day. Here we are talking about the Paris Agreement. This is a very internationally politically motivated article, not in a wrong sense, but then yes, it's talking a lot about politics. But then let's focus only on what is important from UPSC point of view. This caters to GS paper 3 as well as your prelims examination. Here we are talking about simply about the Paris Agreement. Now it is believed that the Paris Agreement was way better than all its predecessors, or at one point it is believed that it is not as stronger or not as good as its predecessors. Now, but we have to simply understand that there were several predecessors for the Paris Agreement, like the Kyoto Protocol, like the Rio Declaration, you have the Montreal Protocol, the Copenhagen Summit. All these things were the predecessors for the Paris Agreement. Now, the good thing about the Paris Agreement is it's quite different from all its predecessors because it brought all countries together. It brought all countries together, and it moved away from the idea of CBDR. What is CBDR? Common but differentiated responsibilities. It moved away from the idea of CBDR and it gave the idea of nationally determined contributions. Now, this nationally determined contributions said all countries should put efforts no matter what. All countries will be on an equal footing no matter what. Of course, as a part of this is they have to report regularly about the developments that are happening in their country, and they will have to fight or they'll have to do their best to control greenhouse gas emissions in the country, and that will immediately solve, or that will immediately lead to what the Paris Agreement aimed at, that is the limiting the increase of global warming or the global temperature below 2 degrees Celsius. So this is the idea of the Paris Agreement. Also, Paris Agreement said that there are no set target, ladies and gentlemen. The only target is that we have to limit the global warming or the global earth temperature to reaching 2 degrees Celsius, and we have to slash the greenhouse gas emissions, and this should be reached. It also said that there are no penalties. All have the freedom to change their policies, change their norms, change their rules according to their own circumstances, and this is the only target that you have to reach. Now, a lot of people said, okay, this is cool, we can do this is simply good, this is good, providing us some kind of freedom and leeway. But the scientific community and a lot of countries, including Donald Trump previously in the US regime, said that this is not enough, because firstly it is not providing the targets, and secondly it is a little bit of partial towards the developing countries. Now the scientific community has said that even if the global temperature reaches 1.5 degrees Celsius mark, remember Paris Agreement is talking about 2 degrees Celsius. Even if 1.5 degrees Celsius mark it reaches, it will have vast ramifications on our environment or biodiversity. We have to stop at this only, not let it go till this, because if it is reaching 1.5 degrees Celsius, simply one example is that 70 to 90% of corals on this planet will be destroyed, or they would be dead. Even the IPCC report has said that at least 1 degree hotter will have the worst effects on the environment of the country. So we have to not just worry about greenhouse gas emissions, but we have to talk about a globalized economy or a globalized society. And if you look at the Paris Agreement carefully, nowhere does it talk about a globalized economy or a globalized society. So this is what is needed, and here is where countries should connect, and then it is only then that this problem of the greenhouse gas emissions or the global emissions that will affecting the countries or the world's environment as such will be stalled or will be stopped. So Paris Agreement, yes, has its own advantages and disadvantages, but predominantly look at it about how India went ahead. So if you know, before the Trump elections happened, John Kerry came down, and India was not persuaded, you can say, but then India was provided the good things about it and said, yes, you can definitely join it. But as you know, India joined it. Trump came into power, and Trump was completely against the policy. So we know that even Joseph Biden is definitely up for the policy. He has put his own standards, put his own things into picture. So we will see how this will pan out in the future. But of course, every country has its own individual responsibilities, and it's not bound by any agreement. From the humanistic perspective, or from the perspective of being individuals and for the people of the world, countries should take their own responsibility, should take their own initiatives to make sure that greenhouse gas emissions are slashed and global warming is not the immediate threat for us. With this, let us move on to the next article of the day. Here we are talking about the SUFFER system. This caters to GS paper 2 as well as prelims examination, GS paper 3 as well as prelims examination. Now SUFFER stands for System of Air Quality, System of Air Quality and Weather Forecasting and Research. SUFFER stands for System of Air Quality and Weather Forecasting and Research. So this SUFFER system is prepared or established to measure the air quality. Basically, it is done to measure the air quality in a city or in a region or in any place. It measures the overall pollution levels and puts into picture through a real-time air quality index. Through a real-time air quality index. So as you know, there is a giant, if you are from Delhi, you know there is a giant true color LED display which talks about the air quality in the country through color coding. So this is a air quality monitor as such to talk about the uh, pollution level in the country. Now this SUFFER comes under the Ministry of Earth Sciences. Please don't get confused. It is not under Ministry of Environment and Forest. It is under the Ministry of Earth Sciences. It is indigenously developed system. It is not borrowed or imported from any country. It is indigenously developed by whom? By Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, which is located in Pune, and the Indian Meteorological Department or the India Meteorological Department. So these are some facts about the SAFAR system. It is very important for us because it becomes a part of the quality early warning system for air quality. So as you know, Delhi is suffering from big problem called as the air pollution, where several things are adding to the air pollution in the country, and this SAFAR system is a part of the measures that will help in fighting this problem. Now, this SAFAR system monitors all weather parameters. This SAFAR system monitors all weather parameters. Now, what are the weather parameters? You can talk about temperature, rainfall, humidity, wind speed, wind direction, solar radiation, etc. The pollutants that are monitored by SAFAR are as follows. Let me clear this. The pollutants monitored by SAFAR are as follows: PM 2.5, particulate matter 2.5, PM 10, particulate matter 10, ozone, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxide, benzene, toluene, xylene, and mercury. So all these things are taken into consideration by SAFAR also. Please remember, weather parameters are also taken into consideration. Remember, these mercury, xylene, toluene, and benzene are also coming into picture. It has a lot of benefits. Of course, you can add these points in your answers as well. With this, let us move on to the last article or the last facts about geography. Now here geography becomes very important because you never know, UPSC can always ask you about how many countries are bordering this country, or which sea or which water body is bordering which country. So Iran is in picture, Iran is in news, Nigeria is also in news. In previous DNEs we've also discussed about Ethiopia, right? The Tigray region is located in Ethiopia. So for today, let's limit our discussion to Iran and Nigeria. So if you see, Iran is a very important country when it comes to West Asia. Its capital is Tehran. It is bordered by countries namely Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey, Iraq, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Turkmenistan. See again, it's hardly sharing its borders with Kuwait, but you can of course believe that Kuwait is a part of the borders. And then you can talk about it's bordering Persian Gulf, it's bordering Strait of Hormuz, it's bordering Gulf of Oman, right? So you know, in Iran we have the Chabahar port, which is located in the Gulf of Oman. If you want to lead to Persian Gulf, you have to cross the Strait of Hormuz. Here it is bordered by the Caspian Sea. Definitely Iran borders Caspian Sea. So of course Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey, Iraq, you can say Kuwait also, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, all these countries border Iran. It's a very important country. It's been in news for a lot of reasons. So it becomes imperative for us to learn about the borders of Iran, and the presence of India in Iran is also very important. So you know, there is this Chabahar port as well. Next, we can talk about Nigeria. Nigeria is an important country located in the, you can say, quite in the Central African region towards the Western African region. That is the Central West African region. Now, Nigeria, its capital is Abuja, ABUJ, Abuja. It's bordered by countries like Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Benin. So this is the Chad Lake. It's bordered by Chad in through this lake, and of course there is quite little land boundary as well. So it's bordered by Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Benin. It opens up to the Atlantic Ocean. See, if you see here, so opens up to the Atlantic Ocean. If you see the African map, if you see the world map is here. So this is the facts with regards to the geography related things for UPSC exam, predominantly for prelims examination. Well, that's it for today's discussion. I hope you enjoyed today's session. If you have any doubts or any discrepancies, write to me in the comment section. We can discuss. Until next time, take care. Bye bye.